and settled in, but I think we'll go ahead and kick it off. Um, Gabe kind of gave a little teaser there of the workflow that I'd like to talk through today about the ransomware recovery. But I know that you always say recovering from ransomware really starts with good planning. So maybe if you could start there on how important that piece is and some critical things to remember and maybe just some other things that people have trouble with or might forget.
Sure. Yeah, planning be uh, can't be devalued in any way. Being on webinars like this to get more information, to get your head around what you want to do are critical, and that really helps you build that plan. And the first thing you want to do in your plan is make sure that it's a tested plan. You want to make sure it's a secure plan, that you put in enough work around the edges so that when it happens, because inevitably I think we can all kind of conclude that ransomware is something that most likely will happen at some point to your company. You're prepared and ready for that eventuality. So the first thing I would say for the planning piece is getting your head around, hey, I've got to have something like a secure backup. I've got to have of course, you got to have all of the production security features. Hey, I want to have, antivirus and endpoint protection, ransomware scanning. All of those pieces have to be there as well. But as we're talking a layered approach, one of the layers that you have to account for is the backups. So you want to make sure your backups are immutable. They're air gapped from your production. They're protected with things like multi-factor authentication. They have a zero trust environment where they don't leverage your single sign-on or whatever other admin credentials you would use in the production environment, because if those are what's compromised, you want your backup solution to be available. And then the next part of your plan is a plan you can test. And so having an environment you can test in, having a solution that is testable, not just in a subset of the solution, but in its entirety is really important. So building that plan and all of those layers becomes really the first step and your best chance of success in doing this.
Yeah, I know you always say that a plan isn't, a document that you complete and then file away. It's a living, breathing thing, and it's only as good as the last time it was tested as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to an IT administrator friend of mine. He goes, "Oh, it's kind of like the diet I'm on. It's not just a diet that you do for a short time. It's really you got to change the way you think about eating." And this is the same thing. You got to change the way you think about your environment and how you protect it. It's the same mentality. And I thought that was a real kind of great analogy to build that on.
And what about frequency for testing or other people other than IT involved in testing? Is that dependent on organization, or do you have any recommendations there?
Um, it is never dependent on organization to organization. Your testing plan should always involve at a minimum the leaders of every business unit in your company. So if you have a different sales team from your HR team, from your accounting team, from your IT team, your widget makers, whatever it is that you do, every vertical within your company, every kind of branch of your tree needs to have someone who has a voice in that testing, not only in certifying that the test is working and meets the criteria for the business, but that they understand what goes into it, how you get the end results out of it, so that when a disaster or a ransomware attack happens, there's no surprises. That's what you're trying to eliminate in your test, is surprises.
Yeah, and it seems like like you mentioned this at the beginning that ransomware has become a huge focus for really all of our clients. We used to help, or we still do, but the focus used to be helping people recover from all different types of disasters, right? Like natural disasters, fires, flood, power outages, which we still help people with. But the reality is that the most likely disaster IT professionals will face will be ransomware. So when it comes to actuality, we find ourselves in this event. Can you kind of walk us through what that recovery process would look like with Quorum?
Yeah, so so let's say you have your plan, you're ready, and ransomware does hit. The first thing that happens is your plan is tabled, because what has to happen first is a business discussion on what you want to do to address this. And whether that's paying the ransom, following through with your plan, how did they get into your environment, calling your insurance company, all of these other things have to happen business wise before you can flip that switch and turn things back on. And so the first thing that any insurance company is going to recommend is that you do forensics to find out how they got in your environment. And in order to do those forensics, they require what's called a clean room environment. They need a place to look at these servers that is not connected to the internet, where they can see what actions these infiltrators have taken. And with Quorum, our test environment is a full clean room environment, because you can bring up the entire domain in an isolated environment from your production or from internet access to look at all this data. And the brilliancy of that model is that with the clean room that we already have and all the servers ready to run, and you just bring them up, is that forensics can start on that at the same time the IT team can start on the production environment on what steps they're going to have to do to recover that data. And they might not pull the trigger to recover yet, but they can prep and they can get ready and they can do the preliminary things that are part of their plan to be ready for when the forensics team says, okay, you can go on, this image from this date is clean. You can recover that one and move forward. And that becomes the path forward. And the reason that it's so important to follow that strategy is because if you don't, and if they're still in your environment and you're reinfected, insurance won't cover it if you didn't follow their rules. So you want to make sure you apply that mentality to your recovery strategy when it hits.
And other than cyber insurance requirements, what are the advantages of having a clean room in the instance of a ransomware incident?
Yeah, there's many. The ability to go in and see which snapshots are good, the ability to make sure that everything is removed ransomware wise, or maybe they have keyloggers, maybe they have other malware or viruses installed in your environment, or backdoors where they can get back in with. Making sure that all of that is removed is your first step. Um, Currently, statistics are saying that 80% of people that are infected with ransomware are hit again. And not having a clean room and doing this research to find out and ensure that your stuff is not marked and not reinfected is the critical path. And so you really need to focus in on that and leverage things like the clean room to make sure all of that's good and working.
Makes a lot of sense. It also gives you that isolation to do all those things kind of without outside interference as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the definition, right? It's a room that isn't hampered by the production network. So it's not connected to the internet. All the work you're doing is not being seen by the ransomware people because it's separate from your production network. And it gives you that flexibility to really hone in and see what all activity was done on those servers.
Absolutely. Can you talk about how Quorum creates the clean room, that space for our clients?
Sure. So we do it in a couple of ways, depending on the size of your environments. But if you are a single appliance customer, we basically have a virtual network within the appliance that is not connected to any physical port. So there's no way for that communication to get outside of the appliance. And you can bring up all the servers in that isolated instance. They can see each other, but they don't see the internet. They don't see outside of the box. And you can fully test different snapshots. You can test and see what activity. Maybe you put a port sniffer on there, and you're listening to what activity is going across the virtual network, and all of these things become possible in an isolated environment that you can leverage. And then from there, You can then move machines to production when you feel they're ready. So the clean room environment is an isolated place inside the appliance. Now, if you're in a multi-appliance environment, you can connect physical ports directly from appliance to appliance to extend that clean room and stay off of your production network, but to still allow the appliances and all of the servers to see each other so you can do a full test. So we have lots of options with our clean room, but in all instances, we make sure that it's separate from your production, separate from internet access, separate from anything that could infect other things or let the ransomware people know that you're doing testing to not pay them, so that they don't take any further action. So it's a very secure place where you can do all of this activity.
That sounds really powerful. And I know today's focused on ransomware recovery, but are there other use cases for that clean room?
A million, really. You could use it for performing full DR tests. You could use it for maybe Patch Tuesday. You want to see if the patches that are coming out from Microsoft are going to affect your production environment before you deploy. You could use it for testing application upgrades, or maybe you have DevOps within your company and you're building your own applications that you want to have a test environment for. This gives you all of those capabilities without having to add hardware, build out clean rooms, recreate the wheel, and do all of it manually. So it's a very powerful tool, really under leveraged in our product.
And we just had our first question. So John, thanks for chatting in. He said, sounds like he's a current Quorum customer and they don't currently have a local appliance. Is there a way that he can leverage the clean room?
Then I'm guessing if he doesn't have a local appliance, he has direct to cloud. And the clean room environment and everything I said for the local appliance applies exactly the same way within our cloud. We have an entire test network within the cloud. You can bring up all the servers, perform full DR tests, clean room environment tests, and everything right from our Quorum cloud as well.
Mhm. Yeah, this sounds like just another advantage of having dedicated backup and recovery resources. Because I know that you and I have both ran into clients before that have good backups, but maybe due to the incident, they don't really have a place to recover as one of their issues. But they also don't have additionally this free space where they can leverage all the capabilities you've been talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The test environment in our product is pretty unique and pretty powerful in that way. We're not relying on you having an extra ESX host sitting by or extra hardware to recover to. It's all built into the box. And the other thing I want to just side note here while I'm thinking about it, because I think it's important to note, is in our Quorum Cloud, all the features that I've talked about for the local appliance apply, but that is also a physical air gap to your network. So we have the virtual air gaps within the appliances. We also have a physical air gap to the Quorum Cloud. So that's another step of removal to keep uh, ransomware attackers from getting to your data. So I just wanted to make sure I said that. I know we're kind of going backwards into the planning phase and knowing how to keep multiple copies of your data, but I thought it was important to note that.
Definitely is. And John just followed up with a clarification question. So I'd misunderstood him. The question is, he's protecting an environment that's all in the public cloud, so he doesn't have any local machines.
Oh,
So for a person like that, would they have an option to leverage Quorum's clean room?
yeah, so we can connect to any of the public clouds and put an agent on those servers and then back them up to the Quorum cloud to provide all of that functionality. So even if you don't have local servers running at a specific site or data center and you're running them all out of Azure or AWS or whatever, as long as they're running, Linux or Windows OS, we can put an agent on there and back those up directly to the Quorum cloud to give you that same functionality and peace of mind. So even if, heaven forbid, Amazon or Azure, whoever you're using, has some kind of outage or is down for an extended period, you could recover everything to the Quorum Cloud and run directly from there.
That's right. And John and anyone else who might be you know having questions or maybe recently deployed some servers into the public cloud. We, a lot of our clients have moved some or a lot of their environment to the public cloud. So the quorum functionality, we've made it apply the same for local prem servers, whether those are physical or virtual, and servers in the public cloud. So just to extend beyond access to the clean room, all of the great functionality that we have for on-prem servers, we've applied to those servers now living in the cloud. And we can also support customers who have a hybrid environment, which is most likely the case of what we've been experiencing. But thanks for the good question, John. Fire away if you've got another one, and maybe we can connect after the call to answer any other questions you might have about protecting your servers in the cloud. Anyone else have some questions? Feel free to fire away. Gabe, I might just ask you to kind of help close the call. Again, today was talking about ransomware recovery. We talked about some key stages to helping us really set ourselves up for success, having a plan, testing that plan. Once we get into an actual ransomware recovery situation, you've highlighted some tremendous value that can be leveraged by the clean room. Other than having that virtually air-gapped space, which is going to provide the clean room, what are some really other fundamental things that need to be in place from like a backup standpoint to make sure that the information will be secured and that we'll have a point in time to recover to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this goes back into that whole planning thing. When you're building your plan and when you're executing that plan, you want to make sure that you're following the best practices that are out there right now. And following NIST best practices or any kind of security guidelines that are out there will really help you in that success planning. Things like having 3 copies of your data, your production copy, a local copy, and a remote copy, and making sure that they're all immutable and that they're air-gapped, solution. So that 3-2-1 mentality from the 1980s still applies today to your backup strategies. And I think that's important to make sure that those best practices are built into your plans. Reaching out to your insurance company and asking to do a tabletop exercise is probably also a very good scenario builder for you, because you'll see what they're seeing out in the industry to give you a better hold on what ransomware is doing to other customers, so you're better prepared. Attending webinars like this are equally as important in that, to give you that information so you can see with clarity the possibilities that are going to happen, and you can try to plan accordingly. The other thing I would probably jump into is so Quorum solution is cloud-based and appliance-based solution, which means we provide hardware in order to run the servers that we are bringing up if you have a disaster. And that's an important side note, because if you can't trust your production, you're going to be rebuilding that before you can recover. And you can't rebuild that until you're done with the clean room exercise. So you are probably 2 weeks out from recovery because of those 2 limitations. But having something that can boot those servers, provide that clean room, and push those clean servers into production and have the compute becomes that critical path forward, reducing and compressing that timeline down into however long it takes forensics to work. And you can do things simultaneously versus in a single threaded pattern, which a lot of recovery strategies end up in. And this helps you avoid that and streamline a lot of those processes. So the ability to recover back to your VMware environment, but as well as recover on the appliance and provide enough compute and horsepower to work all those machines is really important, and I can't stress it enough. Now, whether that is an appliance locally, and I keep saying appliance, but also our cloud does the exact same thing. So if you're directly backing up to our cloud, the ability to bring up all those servers in a clean room environment and into a production environment when they're ready, um, helps compress and reduce the chances that you're going to be down for an extended period of time.
I mean, that's how many times have we seen that where someone comes to us because they had some sort of issue, could have been ransomware or another outage, and they were unpleasantly surprised by their recovery process and time because while they had a really good backup solution, their provider, like you say, may not give them the resources to recover, and that might be locally and or in the cloud. So I would say if your current backup solution doesn't have additional resources to recover on local, if you don't have a dedicated source offsite, whether that's your own location or through your backup provider, then they may be providing you a good backup solution, but it's not necessarily a good recovery solution, because due to ransomware or hardware failure, or natural disaster, we may not have a play. Recovering those images to the production equipment is not always an option. So having secondary equipment both locally and offsite, I think, is tremendous in making sure we have as little downtime as possible, regardless of the issue.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a customer, this is probably a while ago now, who had to recover to our appliance because the one scenario they didn't take account for in their DR plan is if their storage platform went down. So they talked about, oh, if our hypervisor goes down, if our VMs go down or whatever, but all of their storage was in one place. And if that had a problem, they said, well, we have a replication of our storage to the other site, but the problem was they had a bug in their firmware that was replicating bad data as well. So they ended up with the problem on both sides because they had a ubiquitous storage platform, right? It was just one type of storage, and they couldn't recover. And so they ended up having to run off of the Quorum appliances for about 3 months while they worked with their vendor to get a patch for the firmware problem they were having. So these problems can come from anywhere, and it's the scenarios you don't want to consider that always strike, whether it's ransomware or firmware from a hardware vendor. Having the resources to bring those servers up and run is always a best practice.
Absolutely. Let's see, just some questions here about having to send the recording, which I'm happy to share this if anybody'd like to see it or share it with others. Don't see any other last questions coming through. So maybe, Gabe, is there anything else you'd like to mention, or maybe just kind of summarize the clean room as part of the ransomware recovery process just one more time before we hang up? Because I think that was just a really tremendous point that we're getting a lot of questions and interest on currently.
So any best practice is going to tell you that if you have a third party that has infiltrated your environment for any reason, ransomware, a virus, whatever, the best practice is going to say, find out how they got in and what they did while they were there before you do anything else. Because putting everything back into production while they're still there just lets them do it again or do something worse. So the first thing is always going to be to find out how they got in and make sure you got them out of the environment before you move forward. Having our clean room environment lets you see what they did while they were there, and also possibly how they got in, but they could have got in through a workstation or other means. But it lets you see what they did to your servers while they were there. It lets your forensics team start that process, get a 99% of that done, while you work on the hardware that you have, getting it readied to recover your platform. So that clean room environment becomes the critical path to help you get back into full production, and leveraging that in any way, shape, or form that you can, whether it's for tabletop exercises, bring your insurance forensics team in and have them look at it. Have them say, oh, you know what, this is great. We want to use it for this or for that. Those are always positive things that help you in the planning. Not to quote NBC, but the more you know, really does apply in this kind of situation. And trying to get information from every resource you can will really help you with that planning aspect. And then being able to leverage Quorum and Quorum's clean room recovery has helped 100% of our customers come back from ransomware. So that's really how I would kind of end that.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish we didn't have so many customers who are facing ransomware, but it does feel good to represent a team that comes in and saves the day. Like Gabe said, 100% of the time we've helped our clients successfully recover from ransomware. I'm not sure there's a lot of, or any other backup companies out there are able to say that. So um, wish it wasn't such a big issue, but it does feel nice to be able to provide a solution to people. Gabriel, thanks as always for leading just a great, thoughtful conversation. Already got a few people in the chat saying how great it was. So thanks for leading us through the conversation. Thanks to those who signed in today and participated via questions. Hope you enjoyed and found use out of this conversation about ransomware recovery and leveraging a clean room or a clean space during that process. My team is going to follow up with everybody who attended today. So if you have any other follow-up questions or would like to see a one-on-one demonstration of our recovery solution, that'd be a great time to connect. Gabriel and everyone else, thank you very much.
Have a good day, everybody.
Cheers.